Imagine a city of 500,000 people, asleep under the dark skies of September 1666. Narrow streets, wooden houses, and silence, until a spark in a small bakery ignites the greatest inferno London has ever seen. Within hours, flames leap from rooftop to rooftop. By morning, the city is drowning in fire. Families run for their lives, churches crumble, and the night sky turns blood red. This was no ordinary fire. For 4 days, London burned. And from its ashes, a new city was born. This is the story of the Great Fire of London. To truly understand the Great Fire, we must first look at the city of London in the 17th century. It was a city alive with trade, wealth, and energy, but also filled with danger. Over 400,000 people crowded inside its medieval walls. Streets were narrow and winding, homes were built tightly together, often leaning toward one another, and nearly all of them were made from timber coated with tar, as flammable as dry straw. Markets were packed, warehouses overflowed with goods, and the River Thames was the lifeline of the city. Yet beneath this bustling surface, London was a tinderbox, just waiting for a spark. And as if fate had been preparing the city for tragedy, only a year before, in 1665, London was struck by the Great Plague. Nearly 100,000 souls perished, leaving the survivors fearful and weary. The city was weakened, and no one could have imagined that something even more devastating was about to happen. September 2, 1666. The city of London sleeps under a warm, dry night. On a narrow street called Pudding Lane, Thomas Fariner, the king's baker, finishes his work and retires to bed. In his bakery, the ovens are still hot, and a few glowing embers remain. Sometime after midnight, those embers catch on dry fuel stored nearby. Within moments, sparks leap across the bakery. Flames lick the wooden beams, smoke thickens, and the fire grows. Fariner and his family escape through an upstairs window, but the fire does not rest. Carried by a strong east wind, it leaps from one house to another, racing down Pudding Lane like a hungry beast. London's great tragedy has begun, and no one can stop it. By the early hours of September 2nd, the fire had broken free of Pudding Lane. A strong east wind carried sparks across rooftops, and within hours, entire streets were ablaze. Londoners tried desperately to fight the flames, forming bucket lines from wells in the river, using leather fire squirts, and pulling down burning thatch. But against the inferno, their efforts were useless. The narrow wooden houses acted like dry tinder. Flames leapt from roof to roof, alley to alley, spreading faster than anyone could escape. The diarist Samuel Pepys, who watched the destruction unfold, wrote that the scene was an unimaginable horror. The glow of the fire could be seen for miles, as London's nightmare had only just begun. By the second day, the inferno had grown beyond imagination. Strong winds fanned the flames into a storm of fire, driving it deeper into the city. Panic swept through the streets. Families fled their homes in terror, carrying children, pets, and whatever belongings they could grab. Carts overloaded with furniture clogged the narrow lanes, while thousands rushed toward the River Thames, hoping to escape by boat. The fire showed no mercy. Churches, markets, and warehouses fell one after another. Explosions echoed as barrels of gunpowder and stores of oil ignited. King Charles II himself rode into the chaos, commanding fire breaks, ordering houses torn down to halt the flames. But the fire was too powerful, and the people too desperate. London was sinking into chaos, and the worst was still to come. By the third day, the fire had swallowed the very heart of London. Entire districts lay in ruins, and still the flames marched on. The most devastating moment came when the fire reached St. Paul's Cathedral. Surrounded by wooden scaffolding, the great church ignited like a torch. Inside, priceless manuscripts, records, and treasures fed the flames. Witnesses described the horror as the cathedral's massive spire crumbled in an explosion of sparks. Rivers of molten lead poured down the streets, setting fire to anything in their path. The heat was so fierce that stones cracked apart like glass. From miles away, the fiery glow lit up the sky. Londoners stood on the riverbanks, helpless, watching their proudest symbol collapse into ash. For many, it felt as though London itself was dying. On the fourth day, hope finally returned. The winds that had fueled the inferno began to die down, giving firefighters their first real chance to fight back. Under the command of King Charles II and his brother, the Duke of York, crews worked tirelessly. Soldiers and civilians tore down rows of houses, creating wide firebreaks to block the flames. Gunpowder was used to blow up entire streets, sacrificing buildings to save what remained of the city. Slowly, the fire's advance was halted. By nightfall, the Great Fire was no longer spreading. London was scarred and smoldering, but at last, the worst was over. When the flames were finally extinguished, the scale of destruction became clear. More than 13,000 houses, 87 churches, and countless shops and warehouses had been destroyed. The once crowded streets of London were now piles of ash and stone. Over 80,000 people were left homeless. Families camped in the open fields outside the city walls, struggling to survive without food or shelter. Yet, amid the devastation, something remarkable happened. The fire had cleansed London of the plague that had haunted it the year before, burning away the rats and filth that carried disease. Slowly, the city began to rise again. Plans were drawn for wider streets, sturdier buildings of brick and stone, and safer construction that would prevent such a disaster from ever happening again. The Great Fire had destroyed London, but it also gave birth to the modern city we know today. In the years that followed, London rose from the ashes. The task of redesigning the city fell to brilliant minds, most notably Sir Christopher Wren. Wren's vision included wide boulevards, open squares, and stronger buildings made of brick and stone. His most ambitious creation was the new St. Paul's Cathedral, a masterpiece of architecture that still stands as a symbol of resilience. The fire had been a tragedy, but it also marked a turning point. London was transformed from a medieval city of wood and narrow alleys into a modern capital, stronger, safer, and grander than before. The Great Fire of London was one of the most devastating disasters in the city's history. In just 4 days, it reshaped the capital forever. From the ashes came resilience. From destruction came renewal. The lessons learned after 1666 laid the foundations for the modern city, a London of strength, beauty, and endurance. Today, the monument to the Great Fire still stands, a towering reminder of both tragedy and triumph. The flames destroyed a city, but they also forged its future. This was the story of the Great Fire of London, a disaster that became the spark of